Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I am happy to have Jessica Strawser back with us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
Jessica was here to talk about her fantastic novel, page-turning novel, The Last Caretaker. But today we're talking about her latest, and I think her greatest. They're all great, but this is great, Catch You Later. And it's an instant USA Today bestseller, as was The Last Caretaker. So let me just tell you a little bit about Jessica, if you don't know. She's the USA Today bestselling author of Catch You Later and The Last Caretaker. And her other books are The Next Thing You Know, A Million Reasons Why, Forget You Know Me, Not That I Could Tell, and Almost Missed You. This is her 7th novel. She was editorial director at Writer's Digest for nearly a decade before becoming a novelist, and she is an editor at large there. And she's also a career authors contributing editor, popular speaker at writing conferences across the US, and freelance editor and writer with bylines in the New York Times Modern Love column, Publishers Weekly, and other venues. Jessica, welcome, welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, and we have so much to talk about. Catch You Later does so much. First of all, it's multiple timelines, 2 timelines, and 2 POVs. One in 2016 from the point of view of Mickey, and one in 2024 from the point of view of Lark. So can you tell us how A, the idea came about, and B, what the book is about? And then we'll get into it.
Absolutely. So, Catch You Later is about 2 best friends, Lark and Mickey, who live kind of in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. And they work at their town, really one of the only things in their town. Town is probably a generous word for it, but there's a highway travel stop on the side of Interstate 75. Just to make it a little more exciting, they talk their boss into letting them work the night shift. So, at first, they made up these 2 rules for like sanity in the middle of nowhere. Say yes to anything and keep your eyes open for a ride out. So they kind of live by these rules in their town, and it was fun for a while, but now it's been 10 years since high school. They're still stuck in these dead-end jobs. It doesn't look like they're getting out of this town anytime soon. And one night, a guy in a good-looking guy in a BMW convertible stops through on his way for coffee in the middle of the night and strikes up a conversation with Mickey. Turns out he's on his way to a destination wedding at the beach, and he spontaneously invites her to be his +1, and she just takes her apron off in the middle of the travel stop and gets in his car and tells Lark she'll see her in a couple of days, only she never comes back.
And
So
she says, catch you later, right? Which was
yes,
their
catch you
phrase.
later is the last thing she says on her way out the door as Lark is trying to talk her out of doing this crazy thing, but she is following their rules, right? Say yes to anything and keep your eyes open for a ride out. And so then it fast forwards 8 years later. Lark is still working at the same travel stop, finally trying to put her life back together after people sort of blamed her for quote unquote letting Mickey go. She kind of is trying to stop blaming herself for that as well. And she recognizes the same driver coming back through, which kind of ignites the cold case, if you want to call it that, into the search again for what happened to Mickey. So it's kind of a mystery where the central question of the book is what happened to Mickey. And it's cool as a reader. I think it's a lot of fun with the dual timelines and dual points of view. We get to get in the car with Mickey and kind of go on this adventure with her and find out what happens, alternating chapters with Lark in the future, kind of trying to piece this together. And it's also a friendship story about these two lifelong best friends who really didn't have much in the world except for each other to lean on. And Lark doesn't want anything bad to have happened to Mickey. She wants to hang on to this idea that maybe Mickey just kept saying yes and kept getting opportunities to go do something more fabulous. And why would she come back? But then also the fact that she didn't even say goodbye and left her behind and worried about her. So kind of part mystery, part friendship story.
Yeah, and it's a very accessible mystery. Like, I don't like those hard-boiled mysteries where everywhere you turn, there are dead bodies and things like that. It's really based on reality. Like, I would think the same questions that the characters were thinking. And you had very accessible things happen. Like, Lark would have recurring nightmares where she's looking for Mickey. There's a very real, like you said, friendship. And friendship is a big part of a lot of the books that you write. It's important to, kind of ground that. Craft is so involved in this book because not only did you do two timelines, you also did two POVs, which is challenging to do. And you didn't do it that way in The Last Caretaker because you were on the program for that. I mean, obviously, the setup is she's leaving at a certain time. And so that's an important period, but you're taking the reader along as well. How did it work to structure two timelines and two POVs? Like, did you write everything at once and then break it down? Or did you write each character? Like, how did you do that?
Believe it or not, I actually wrote this the way you read it in that order, but I was very intentional with so back and forth. It really does alternate. We never see one character twice in a row. It really does alternate back and forth between the two. But I love books where the reader has actually a lot of information that one of the characters doesn't have, right? I think that's a really cool feeling of the reader kind of being in on part of the story. So it's so interesting that Lark doesn't know anything that happened from the time Mickey got in this guy's car. She doesn't know if they really went to a destination wedding. She doesn't know if he was really a good guy. She has absolutely no idea what happened. And from really like chapter 3, the reader does know, okay, well, so far things are going okay. This is what, you're kind of along. So everything that we get to see from Mickey's point of view is something that Lark has no idea. Lark's trying to piece it together. So from that, I was very intentional about that structure. And for me, that was a lot of fun to write. I think it's fun to read too. I hope it's fun to read. But I definitely set up a challenge for myself because it was so important to me that their friendship come across. And they are never together. They're only together in the opening scene when they're together in the travel stop. And then we're learning through Mickey's eyes as she is kind of heading off on this adventure without Lark and how she feels about that. And something that plays into her decision to, this isn't really a spoiler because it's in like the first chapter, but something that plays into her decision to leave is that Lark is pregnant. So Mickey thinks they're so close that she views this as her responsibility too. So very much like their lives are about to change in this big way. They're not going to be like these two single gals around town, all who are up for fun at 3 in the morning when they get off work. Those days are over. Lark is going to become a single mom. It's going to be really different for them. So how she feels about that and their friendship, we're getting all that from her point of view. And then we're getting it from Lark's point of view and what it meant to her to lose a friend like that and have her just never come back and not know what happened to her. But we really never see them together except for in their memory. So it was really important for me for the friendship to come across authentically. And I think that was the challenge. I think the suspense and the structure and putting the story together was actually felt very natural in building the points of view and the timelines the way that I did. But I had to really be careful about making sure that the relationship between the two of them felt authentic when we never really got to see it playing out in real time.
And so to make a relationship authentic, you can use dialogue, you can use ritual, like they had their little thing that they said, always say yes, and the little phrase, catch you later. Did you try to come up with these kind of ideas that could help solidify and show on the page their friendship?
Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of backstory there too, where the friendship has been really formative to who they are and how they became who they are. And when Mickey gets in the car with this guy, Chris, they're driving and they very quickly realize this is a all-night drive with a stranger and they're trying to get to know each other. He doesn't know anything about her either. It's not just that she has gotten in a car with a stranger. He has invited the stranger into his car, and maybe he shouldn't have done that either. Maybe Mickey's not reliable. So I think through her, what she chooses to tell Chris about herself and what she is thinking about that she chooses not to tell him at the time, and her memories of Lark and everything that they've been through. And I think a lot of it, it's like careful backstory. He is a really important third character in the book. The rich BMW driver.
I mean, I'm not giving anything away, but that there's this rich family connected. So it's kind of opening up a world as well, and that you're writing about that.
And a lot of issues of class and privilege and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that Mickey is going to be a fish out of water. If they are, in fact, headed for a destination wedding and she's his plus one, even in the best case scenario, it's a dream come true, but she's probably going to be pretty uncomfortable.
Timelines really work, I think, when they're centered around an event. And so this one was centered around the wedding. There are other timeline elements that you use.
Exactly right. Like we know from the very beginning what day Mickey said she'd be back, right? So we know she never came back, but we also know the events of this story are probably gonna transpire over the next. It's actually a pretty tight time frame.
I love that you say, number one, that you like when the reader knows more than perhaps the character does. So in this case, the reader knows more than Lark does because we go through with Mickey as she goes through her adventures back in 2016. You also mentioned backstory, that you had to add in a lot of backstory. And I find for a writer who isn't very adept, backstory can be a clunky device in a way if somebody's not used to crafting with it. So,
Mhm.
what are some of the ways that you were able to put the backstory in a more subtle way, but also a way that informed the whole book?
I think when you have dual timelines that are, mine are 8 years apart, it might be a little different if there's a bigger chasm there, like one of those, like a historical novel where there's a present day timeline and a very historical timeline. But in something like this, it's almost like the two timelines are a bridge. We might not know what happened in between, but we know from both sides kind of this was the reality at the beginning and this is the reality now. So I think in that way, it's already kind of framed that it's going to feel like less of an info dump because you think, okay, in the opening scene, we see Lark is pregnant. Oh, yeah, she's got a 7-year-old daughter in first grade, and we don't know yet exactly what that's been like having an infant and still having her best friend be missing and raising her, but we already are filling in some blanks on our own, right? So then when Lark starts telling us some select details, then we can kind of fill in a lot more. So it never has to be this huge info dump. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, absolutely. And it seems like using timelines, dual timelines, that's the backstory, right? Because the 2016
Exactly.
is the backstory for 2024. Fascinating. I love that. And in terms of your characters, I mean, they're so fully fleshed out. You probably had to decide what to keep in and what to leave out. So, how did you make that determination? Did you set up character profiles for your characters with all their permutations and foibles and quirks, or how did you do that?
It's always really helpful for me to have sort of a shorthand that I'll go to for each character, almost like a little shortcut. I don't do like big worksheets and profiles or anything like that, but I think, the thing that's interesting about Lark and Mickey specifically is that they're kind of alone in this town. They don't have a lot else going for them. Their family situations are not good. They're not in any kind of attached romantic relationships. Like they're really both heavily reliant on this friendship. And at the beginning of the book, it might seem like they're just the same. They're in the same situation. They work the same job. They live in the same apartment. They're sharing the same car. But they're actually very different. They're very different people. And Mickey has always wanted out of this town more than Lark has. Now, when Mickey says, I can't wait to get out of this town, Lark will be like, yeah, me too. She would be happy to follow her. But Lark does not have that same kind of ambition. And there's something Mickey says early on in like the first or second chapter where she's kind of describing the difference between them. And she's like, I feel like animated character in a Looney Tunes cartoon where every time I make a plot to get out of here, like an anvil falls out of the sky or the road drops off a cliff or like something happens. She had plans to go to college and her funding fell through. Something really terrible happened with her mother. She's always trying to get out of there and something bad happens. And then she says Lark is more like Snow White. She's stuck in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of misfits, but you might even catch her humming. Like she's very good at being happy wherever she is. It's funny how even just a small shorthand like that can really lock you into a character. Like this is the fundamental difference between these two. And Lark has been happily going along with Mickey all these years, but if Lark never left this town, she's honestly going to find a way to be happy wherever she is.
And it's interesting because you show the progression of both the characters, that they are definitely, aside from circumstance, they become different people.
And it's interesting to, I think what happens at the beginning of this book is really a catalyst, is kind of a test of, almost calling Mickey's bluff. Like, here's an opportunity maybe to get out of here. Are you going to take it? And maybe it is what it appears to be, maybe it's not, but this is going to be like a formative, life-changing moment. She just doesn't know that yet.
So to keep the characters connected in the reader's mind, aside from this overarching mystery, what happened when Mickey got in a car with a stranger all those years ago, you create a family connection as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you decided to make that important?
Yes, so Lark, well, we know she was about to start a family, and then Mickey had no really immediate family in the town, but her grandmother does live in the town, and they've never had a great relationship. Her grandmother is kind of this like quintessential cranky old lady, like mean and cranky, and everyone reaches that age where they're old enough that they don't care what people think, maybe, but Nene never cared what anyone thought and is like just now growing into where people think her meanness is is endearing, but she's been the same way her entire life. So they never had a great relationship, but she was kind of the only other connection to Mickey in this town. So they end up kind of becoming this little family unit for better or worse. And that's complicated too, because Mickey's grandmother is also mad at Lark to start with, that she did not stop Mickey from getting in a stranger's car, even though I think she knows deep down that no one really could tell Mickey. Mickey wasn't the type to ask anyone's permission to do anything. So that's complicated as well, but they're really all each other have.
And did you do that to keep that connection? Like, aside from the memories, it's really having a person who also has memories and is connected.
Yeah, and there's that kind of sense of like obligation almost. I mean, Nene isn't in very good health, and when Mickey left, she left Nene too. Like Nene doesn't have anybody else, and Lark kind of feels this responsibility. So is she going to resent that, or is she going to be embrace that opportunity to take on Mickey's family as her own? And maybe it's a little bit of both. So it kind of adds a layer too, where Lark never is very successful at convincing anyone that Mickey is necessarily missing. She's a consenting adult. She got in someone's car. She never called you to tell you where she ended up. That doesn't mean she's missing, you know? It's kind of one other thing where they're like, well, she was also gonna feel responsible for taking care of this relative in poor health, and she look what a bad friend she was. She even saddled you, which I think is how life is. You know, characters don't exist in a bubble. We're all complicated by all our other relationships around.
So what I like is in terms of books, a lot of times people will have like one big challenge or a couple of challenges, but you keep throwing obstacles at these characters. And was that something conscious? Did you think, okay, what could I do now to complicate the life, the situation? Or is that something that just comes organically as you're writing it? Do the characters tell you? People tell me characters speak to them. Did that happen as you were writing? How did that all come about? Because you understand about crafts very well.
I think if you have a premise where you can already kind of guess what the complications are going to be, that's really helpful. There were maybe more choices to be made as far as Lark. She had to be doing something besides just looking for Mickey and like, yes, this is going to drudge up some baggage for her. But yeah, I was pretty careful about things like Lark is engaged to be married in the future timeline. She's finally so close of happiness, but her fiance is a state trooper. The way she feels about law enforcement has been kind of complicated because of this Mickey case, but that's kind of in the past. But now all of a sudden it's not in the past. It's, you know, I think it would have been a very different story and journey for her if the guy she was engaged to was like a truck driver or someone who had nothing to do with anything. But the fact that her fiance, you know, is somebody who has access to maybe some information and some pull, and maybe some of his colleagues didn't treat Lark so well. There's a lot of inherent complications built into that. I think it comes from the characters and their relationships. If you can carefully choose your secondary characters well, then those conflicts and those obstacles are just going to kind of present themselves to you. Like, I didn't necessarily know in advance, if I make her fiance a state trooper, then they can have this argument and they can have this argument and this can cause tension between them. And then, oh my gosh, are they really going to get married at all? Do they trust each other enough? I didn't necessarily know all of that, but I knew, if that's who it was, there would be, you know, a lot of fertile ground there and I could see where it led.
And in fact, you did some research into state troopers. I saw in your
I
acknowledgments that you
did.
wrote that. What was that like? I mean, you didn't do research into like rich families, but you did like state troopers and also licensed vehicles and things that have to do with the plot of the novel.
Yeah, things that have to do with the plot. Exactly. I think the rest, we all have enough lived experiences where that we can draw on. But talking to a state trooper was really interesting. I've been in a number of highway travel stops. I've always been really interested by the ones that really are in the middle of nowhere. You know, when you're just driving and there's an exit, but there's maybe like a Flying J or a Love's. It's a big bustling hub, but there is nothing else around, you know, and sometimes the people watching is pretty good at those travel stops, but you're usually paying attention to the fellow travelers, right? Not really the people working there. And I was thinking it would be really interesting to have a job like this where literally everyone you encounter all day is on their way somewhere else, and you are the only one who stays. I mean, I think even if you worked at like an airport or a place like that, there so many people work there that there would still be something very stable about it. You would encounter so many coworkers and regulars and pilots coming through. And but a highway travel, an interstate travel stop, that's a really transient, like almost anonymous kind of thing. And I just thought that that kind of is an interesting contrast to, you know, if a lot of the people who stop are on their way, either they're like a long haul trucker working really hard, or they're on their way on vacation or someplace really, really great, and you're still stuck there. So that I could just kind of imagine my own characters, but I was curious what it's really like spending a lot of time in a place like that. So talking to a state trooper was super helpful just about what the kind of climate and the culture is. And also, I wanted to find out how he would handle this. I mean, I presented the exact situation to him where, say, you are a regular at a travel stop, the employee comes to you and says, my friend got in this car the other night and she never came back. What would you do? And so he was able to walk me through like what the law enforcement perspective would be,
I
which was
could see how that's really helpful. Yeah, because then you have the knowledge to be able to write what the actual steps would be from that perspective, which,
well, and we think about them as just mostly getting traffic tickets, right? I mean, nobody wants to run into a state trooper.
yes,
Not a
yes.
statey, you're getting a ticket. But it was really interesting hearing his perspective about like actually the amount of crime that they encounter is actually pretty staggering. And he was saying they usually stumble on it. It's not like the critical difference is the sheriff or the police in your town, they often come when you call them. Someone has called 911, but a state trooper maybe is just about to give someone a ticket or is just patrolling at a rest area and a travel stop, and then there's illegal activity going on there and that they suddenly are confronted with. So that was really interesting. It made me think about their jobs in a whole new way and kind of have a whole different level of respect for what they do.
That's fascinating that, you went that deep to get the information that really kept powering the novel
Well, you could
forward.
tell that he really cared. I mean, he actually thought through the situation. You could tell that maybe he would have been a little dismissive of the character, but also that he understood the conundrum.
Now, this book is 328 pages. So, in any book, I mean, it resolves, it has a beginning, middle, and end. The middle is a part of the novel that a lot of people struggle with. What did you do to make sure that the middle, the murky middle, the muddle in the middle, what did you do to make it really resonate?
I'm not an outliner, but I usually have a full synopsis. Like I know what's going to happen, but not exactly how I'm going to get there. So in this case, I knew the answer of what happened to Mickey, but I didn't know everything that was going to happen to her and how she was going to get there. And so usually when I start to hit that murky middle, I go back to my synopsis and think, okay, what did I say was going to happen? And I realize I didn't say. So I usually think I'm going to go back. I'll just go back to my planning materials and get some ideas. Oh, no, I glossed over this. This is why it's murky. For me, that struggle is real. The middle is always the hardest part. And I think I'm not afraid to try things a few different ways and write things that don't end up making it in. I think I'll tend to sort of like overwrite and then cut and then just be critical with yourself. This is too slow. This isn't working. It definitely the back and forth between the timelines helped because there was a certain amount of suspense in that. But for me, yeah, just a lot of trial and error, honestly.
Because you're so prolific, this is your seventh novel. Are you writing faster now, or is it just each book is a separate thing?
I don't know that I am writing faster. I think I spend more time up front, though. I do spend more time on that synopsis and on what those arcs are going to be up front, which is not a part of the process that comes naturally to me and can be a struggle. But then I do think I have a bit of a clearer picture than I used to once I sit down to write. But no, I don't think I'm necessarily fast. I'm disciplined. It might not be happening quickly, but it's happening every day.
You write every day then.
Yeah, I'll usually have a word count goal, like 1,500 words a day, 5 days a week. And then even if you go off course, if you stay disciplined like that, once you have a manuscript to work with, you can always make it better. You can't do anything with the blank page, right?
That's so true. So you just get those 1,500 words down, and does it take hours, or can it take an hour, or it's just you doing
Yeah,
it?
I mean, usually it's hours. It takes however long it takes. So the unfortunate thing we find out is that sometimes even if it seems like it's going really great, like, oh, that came really easy, doesn't always mean it's good.
Right.
When you look at it, you might be like, oh, what was I doing? But it just gets you there. So I'm really, really bullheaded about it. I mean, I'm a mom. I have two kids who get off the school bus in the middle of the afternoon. It's not nighttime yet. I might have my laptop on the sidelines of their soccer practice once I've driven them where they have to go or whatever. If I didn't hit my word count goal at 10 p.m. and everyone else in my house is going to bed, I'm still in my office trying to hit my word count goal. So
I like that. That's a lot of fortitude there. Are you still doing like a book a year? Is that what your schedule is?
I will not have a book out in 2025 for the first time in a really long time, but my last two were really close together. It was actually a little under a year. I think it was about 11 months in between the two. So, little breather now. And I like to use the time in between books too to write other things. I do still do freelance writing and I do a lot of editing. And I always joke that I like to finish a piece of writing more than once a year. So, I find it really helpful to occasionally write some essays and some articles, and it
Yeah,
feeds different parts of your brain to build time in for other things too, and not just be like a book a year, a book a year, a book a year so fast that you never have time to flex.
right. Do you
But
have the idea for your next book already?
I think I do. It's nothing I'm ready to talk about yet,
Of
but
course.
I'm
Yeah.
working on something anyway.
And
So.
will it be very different? It seems like you stretch yourself from book to book.
I don't know. I have all of my books are kind of in this cross section between like book club fiction or women's fiction and suspense. But I do think they're all quite different. Some lean more heavily one way or the other.
Yeah, I like that you gave
So,
a book club reading questions at the end of your book, a group
yes,
discussion guide.
I'm
Um,
actually visiting a book club tonight to
That's
talk about.
awesome.
Yeah.
And you also talk about, I saw this in the book club thing. I didn't think of it at first, but like the Rolling Stones make several appearances in the soundtrack, from the singing trucker wearing vintage concert tees to one of the novel's final scenes. You can't always get what you want. So that's cool. Do
That is a little Easter egg for my dad. He's a huge Stones
you-
fan. So,
Oh, I love that. I love that you kind of take the pieces of your life and put it in. Is there
yeah.
anything I didn't ask you about Catch You Later and the story of Lark and Mickey and Chris?
I don't think so. This has just been a lot of fun to talk about. And yeah, I hope people enjoy the story for what it is. I never had a lifelong friend like that. My family moved around. I have wonderful friends who've been friends my whole adult life and since college, but my family moved around when I was a kid. I never had that friend who like knows what you looked like in kindergarten and waking up from your nap on your wedding day. You know what I mean? So I think I've always been fascinated by that kind of friendship, and it was really fun to write a story about one, and I hope it came through. Did you have a friend like that, Estelle?
I have a male friend who I've known since I was 5 years old, and he was my man of honor at my wedding
Oh, I love that. Your man of honor.
because I
Oh,
met my husband through an event that he invited me to. So,
does he live near you still?
no, now he moved to Las Vegas with his husband.
Okay. So a good excuse to visit Vegas, right?
Exactly, exactly. My husband loves Vegas too, so
I never had a friend like that. So I think people say write what, but I think it's really fun to write what you wish you knew. There's a lot of that in my books, like characters who have a job that I maybe considered but didn't take and things like that. It's like you get to live it a different way, right? So
this is brilliant. This has been such a great time talking with you about your latest, and you have so much more in you. So I can't
I
wait
hope
to
it's
see
fun.
what you do next, really,
Thanks,
Jessica.
Michelle. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.